Welcome to the eCommerce podcast with Matt Edmondson, a show that brings you regular interviews, tips, and tools for building your business online.
Well, hello and welcome to the eCommerce podcast. My name is Matt Edmondson, and this show is dedicated to all of those of you who are running your e-commerce business. That's right. Welcome to the show. This is a podcast. It's great to have you joining us. If you're joining us on Facebook Live, a big shout out and a big welcome to the show. It's great to have you. If you don't know, when we record the interviews with our amazing guests, and we do have an amazing guest tonight, let me tell you, I'll explain about Jesse in just a minute. So we have a great guest coming up. When we do that, when we record the show, we broadcast it live on Facebook at the same time we record the podcast, which is amazing. So in a few weeks' time, this podcast will come out and it will air under the normal podcast channels. And if you're a podcast listener, make sure you subscribe across all of the favorite podcast channels which you can use, like iTunes and Stitcher and all of those places. Make sure you subscribe to the show. But also, if you get a chance, come and join us on Facebook Live. Join in, watch the interview with the guest as we broadcast it live ahead of time when schedules work out between me and people like Jesse, who's going to be on tonight's show. So welcome to the show. As I said at the start, my name is Matt Edmondson, and this show is all about e-commerce. Now, you may have noticed, dear avid listener / viewer, that we've changed the branding. And in fact, we've changed the name of the show. It used to be called the Curiosity Podcast. Now we just call it the e-commerce podcast, just to make it a little bit cleaner and a little bit more understood. So this is the e-commerce podcast with me, Matt Edmondson. Welcome to the show. This is the very first episode of season 3. So we decided to launch the new name and the new branding at the start of season 3, right here at the beginning. So it's great fun just sort of seeing how the podcast evolves, taking on board all your comments, all your thoughts, all your ideas, all your suggestions, mashing those things together and seeing where it leads. And when we started this back in season 1, I had no idea we would end up right here where we are right now. No one could predict COVID. No one could predict any of that sort of stuff. And yet here we are. And so these things evolve and move, don't they, as we go on. So as we are broadcasting over Facebook Live, the interview with a guest, then if you have questions, by all means, put them in the comments. Give us a shout out. Give us a wave. It'll be great to see you, great to hear from you, where you're from. And just let us know. And so, Sean, I see you've put in there what time. I hope this has answered your question. We're actually live right now. So there we go. Let's go for it. So before we get into tonight's guest, let me just take a moment to give a big shout out to the show's sponsors. Let me give a big shout out to one of our show sponsors, Curious Digital. You know what? I love its flexibility. It's such a great platform. You know how when you start out, you might typically use an online platform because they're cheap, they're easy to use, super accessible, but you know what? They aren't that flexible. And as your business grows, you end up moving to an agency, right? Because that's just what you do. And at some point, you're going to have this nightmare to deal with, and it can be incredibly expensive. And the thing for me that I love about KD is it will grow with you. You can start out on the platform easily, and as your business grows, then KD will adapt with you. Now, I don't know of any other platform that does all of that. So if you're in the market for a new e-commerce platform, make sure you follow the links from mattedmondson.com. Take advantage of the offers that they've got for you, and let me know what you think. A big shout out to another show sponsor, the Lightbulb Agency. These guys basically do those bits of e-commerce that you either don't want to do or don't have the skills or expertise to do, right? It's a great service. Let me tell you, these guys do fulfillment, e-commerce marketing, content creation, customer service, product research. I mean, the list goes on. So if you need help with your own online business, you're looking for ways to grow, and you need some help to get there, do get in touch with them. And again, just follow the links from today's show notes. Head on over to mattedmondson.com and you can follow the links to the Lightbulb Agency. We'd love to put you in touch with those guys. And if you forget any of these things, all the links for tonight's show, all the show notes, the links to Jesse, all the notes from the conversation, the video, the recording, everything will just be on the website at mattedmondson.com. You can check that out at mattedmondson.com and everything will be there for you. No problem. So, like I said, welcome to season 3. It is great to have you. Make sure you do subscribe to the podcast, that what is now called the eCommerce podcast, formerly known as the Curiosity Podcast. I dare say you'll hear me talk about this for the next few episodes until we get it cemented that this is what it is now called. So welcome to the show. It's great to have you. Subscribe wherever you get the podcast from. And like I say, join us on Facebook Live, like a few of you are now. And I see some of the comments coming in, which is great. And the little waves and likes, which is fantastic. Do join us on Facebook Live. And the link for the Facebook page is at the website, mattedmondson.com. You can just go to there and follow the link to the Facebook page. Sign up for the notifications for the lives. And whenever we go live, you'll get notified, especially when we do shows like this, where we have an extra special guest coming in, which is always fantastic. So, without further ado, should we bring our guest on? I think we should. Let me introduce him before we do. Now, we are talking to Jesse tonight, Jesse Schoberg. And Jesse is currently living in Manila. When we had the sort of the pre-call, I was talking to Jesse a few minutes before we went live on the show. I said, Jesse, where are you? He said, I am in Manila. He is living in Manila. He's one of these guys that spends his life traveling around the world, running his businesses from wherever he is at. He's been managing remote teams for like over 15 years now. So he's got a good idea on how to do it. And he is going to share with us all his magic and all his insight on how to outsource remote teams. And we're also going to talk about his latest venture, which is going to help us understand why we should, as e-commerce website owners, e-commerce entrepreneurs, why we should be blogging and how we do that, why that's important. He runs a website called DropInBlog. We're going to get into all of that, content marketing. We've got a lot to get through. So without further ado, Jesse, let me bring you on. It's great to have you. Thanks for being here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Matt.
For some reason, sorry. Let's try that again. Now we'll be able to hear you. Welcome to the show, Jesse.
Thanks for having me on, Matt.
No problem. Small technical glitch right at the start there. Now, as I said, you're in Manila, right?
Yep, currently in Manila during the lockdown.
Yeah. Is that a good place to get locked down or not?
It's actually been, considering, it's been all right. They've been handling it all right, and there's been access to resources, and I'm set up in a pretty good spot, so no complaints.
No complaints. So that's awesome. Now, at the time of recording, it is in the UK. It's just before 7 p.m. What time is it for you?
We're pushing 2 a.m. now. Yeah.
2 a.m. in the morning. So you're kind of like used to this sort of late night working thing, I imagine, because of the time zone.
When you're over in this Southeast Asia, constantly working with people in Europe and the States, we work all kinds of different schedules. So you get used to it.
That's great. Well, thanks for being on the show. So let me ask you a question. What's the short version, I guess? How did you end up from, you're from the States originally, I can tell by the accent.
Yeah.
How did you end up in Manila?
I left the States in 2008.
Okay.
And I lived in Latin America for quite a while. So I was mainly living in Panama. And
did you just have the travel bug? Is that what sort of kickstarted it?
Yeah, kind of. Originally, it sort of happened accidentally. It was like I was running an agency at the time and was kind of looking for a new location in the States to live, and remembered that I had been to Panama before and liked it, and kind of thought, maybe should just move there instead of move to Denver or something, and ended up being one of the best decisions of my life, and kind of jump started the kind of expat location independent lifestyle. And, it took a while. I lived a normal life there, and then I kind of slowly started traveling more and more and more. And then maybe about 4 years ago, kind of relocated here to Southeast Asia and been all over. So Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, here in the Philippines, Taiwan, this whole region quite a bit. So, but been based here in the Philippines. Yeah, based here in the Philippines, for a while as well. It's a great region for sure.
So what sort of kept you there rather than going, enough's enough, I'm going back home?
Well, I mean, if once you kind of start living the location independent lifestyle and you get to experience all these cultures and the food and the language and the people and everything, it's pretty amazing. So I'd have a hard time considering going back to living, buying a house in the suburbs in wherever USA. That's just not on the radar.
Wow. Okay. So what does a typical day in Manila look like for you? And how would it be different if you were living back home?
I mean, we could say it could be similar to, if you were in a major metro. I mean, all of the cities that I like to go to I generally live in more metro areas. So spend a lot of time in Bangkok or Saigon or these kind of places. And so, it's, well, not these days, but generally would be go to the cafe and, work out, do the morning grind in the cafe, and then, maybe meet someone else, another entrepreneur for lunch, then catch up with some meetings like this, manage the team, do the same things everyone else does. It's just, just in new places. But what makes it interesting, I find, is that, when you live a normal kind of life pattern, it's the same every day, where you can take that pattern and you can just put it in another city, and then everything's interesting all of a sudden, because the restaurants are different, the food is different, the culture is different, the people have different things. The weekend getaway is somewhere you've never been, not the place that you've been 400 times. So that makes, I find that makes life quite interesting, and it makes it so that you can learn a lot more about the world, and it's quite fascinating. And it's an art as well, so that you don't get too, you're not on vacation, you're still living life.
You're actually working, aren't you?
Yeah.
But what's been the biggest thing that surprised you? Like if someone came to you from back home and said, I'm thinking of doing what you're doing, what would you say? Oh, this is going to be the thing which I think will surprise you the most. What would it be?
That at first there's some major adjustments, especially when there's just routine things that break, or things that don't work in different places, or that function differently, or the internet doesn't work, or you can't find a cafe, or you're the Airbnb that you rented didn't turn out to be what you thought it was going to be. These kind of stumbling blocks, especially when you're first getting started. Mm-hmm. You're just bound to hit these walls, and things fall apart, and you think, oh, this was a lot easier when I was back at home, and it was. But with some time and practice, these things become very normal, and you kind of know what to look for, and you know how to kind of pivot and build a more optimized life sometimes than you would have had back at home, because you have other advantages like your currency arbitrage, and there things, you can have things like staff, and you can have meal prep, and you can have like sort of things that you wouldn't normally get in your home country sometimes.
And so is that because the dollar goes further where you're living, you're able to do more with it?
Yeah, definitely. And some of that is cultural too, but like that's a huge factor. You can definitely get a better life and still a very modern life. We're not talking about living in the middle of nowhere, right? It's just in these major cities, there's just more services, and you can live a pretty interesting life that way. Yeah.
So you go around from city to city. What sort of length of time do you spend in each place, or is there not a formula? You just kind of...
Yeah, it varies. Can be. I try not to do anything less than a month. So usually like 1 to 3 months is kind of the sweet spot. And then what you find after you've done it for a long time, well, when I lived in Panama, I had like a more normal, like I owned an apartment there, and then I would just travel like maybe half the year and kind of do a month away kind of thing. But when I moved to Asia, I decided to be full time in the more nomad style. And then I just do 1 to 3 months per city. But then what happens is, you start to get to know cities, and then it's not this huge reset, because that's the other thing, talking about when you first start doing it, if you go to a new city every month, it's confusing, right? You have to understand how things work and get settled, and that's a disruption in your life. But if you do it for a little while, you can feel at home in any of these cities. So, any of those cities that I just mentioned here in Southeast Asia, I feel at home in all of those cities. I've spent enough time in all of them that I can just show up tomorrow, and, I know where I like to work. I have friends that are living there. I know, enough of the language that I can, go down to the local corner shop and order a local dish instead of just, getting Western food at the tourist spot, this kind of thing. So once you get into it a little bit more, then that becomes pretty exciting, because you get to live almost multiple lives at once, because, you have friends in multiple cities, and then, you get the excitement of different things that are happening in the different places. So
okay. And so I'm just genuinely quite curious here, but do you have you sound like you're going to be living, out of a suitcase all of the time. Is that, so do you travel really light, everything fits in a backpack, and you're not accumulating stuff, I assume?
I'm not that light as some people that live how I do are super crazy minimalist. I'm a little bit in the middle. I mean, compared to normal people, I have barely anything, but compared to the super nomads, I'm kind of heavy. So since about 5 or 6 years now, I live out of a 24-inch suitcase, which is the smaller check size, and a duffel bag and my laptop bag. That's it.
So what tech do you, what's your essential stuff on your little travel list then?
Sure. So, and then I will say, to just kind of augment that, one of my kind of hacks is that when I land in a new spot, in a new apartment, I'm not afraid to spend a little bit to fix up things or buy a couple things that they, so if they don't have the right kitchen stuff that I want, I'll go out the first day. It's kind of one of my rules that
go and get your stuff and set it up how you want it set up.
Yeah. You go spend $100 on this random little things that they didn't have good ones, and maybe you just need like a desk lamp or something like this. Instead of suffering, you just go get those things and be done, and call that part of the rent.
Okay.
And then like this particular place that I'm in now, I've been staying at this particular apartment on and off for almost a year now.
Oh wow.
And so I kind of keep adding, and now it's like has everything, right? So that's pretty great. But yeah, I mean, my tech stack is I'm Apple guy, so it's pretty lightweight though. I don't travel with an external monitor, so I'm just MacBook Pro, iPhone, iPad. I'm kind of a music guy, so I've got a couple different headphone things going on, and that's pretty much it. Pretty light tech stack. Kindle. That's it. Yeah, I don't no standing inflatable desk or anything.
Wow. How many pairs of flip-flops do you have?
One pair.
Just the one pair. Okay.
Yeah.
So with all this, I could spend all evening talking to you about how you do the nomadic travel thing, because I find it curious. There was, and I think we've all got sort of stories, but that's not why we're here. So I have to force myself to stay on track. So what we want to talk about is outsourcing. Now, it sounds like if you've been doing this for 15 years and you've been running a business and growing a business and starting multiple businesses en route, that you've obviously done this whole outsourcing thing and you've kind of figured it out, and that's the start point. Would that be a correct assumption?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's been the business model the whole time, So while it's kind of interesting now, this is extra trending because of the current situation. It's been uptrending the last few years, we'll say, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
and there's been more and more books about it, more and more.
Yeah.
I think for me, it all sort of got kickstarted in my head when I read the 4-Hour Work, which is where I'm sure most people sort of started that from, and then you read Vagabond and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that was kind of the first big, aha, moment for a lot of people, and I think I read the 4-Hour Work Week actually after I got to Panama. And so it's kind of, that came out right around the time after I had left. So for me, that was a big validation, just kind of like, oh yeah, cool. This guy kind of like organized all of my thoughts, Thanks, Tim.
Yeah. Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it.
Yeah, but I will say that most people in my community, read that book and changed their whole life. It was like somehow that book fell into their hand and they said, screw this job, screw this commute, screw the suburbs, and really headed that way because of it. But that was a long time ago. That's been 10 years now.
Yeah, it's been a while. But you're right. It's been becoming more and more people. The world's becoming a much smaller place, isn't it? A much smaller place.
Definitely. And there's been a lot more modern, that book, while it's very inspirational, there's, like the 37 Signals guys have written a couple of books about remote working and remote teams and this kind of stuff. And, there's some more current information than that. But that was definitely the fire starter for many, many people.
Yeah. There's a company, I've not had any dealings with them because I think they only operate in the States, called Belay Solutions. And they keep sort of doing really well, from a business point of view. They're featured a lot. I hear the name a lot, actually, Belay Solutions. And they're all about outsourcing, give us, your virtual PAs and all this sort of stuff that you hear talked about. So can we get into this, right? How did you...
Yeah.
Where to start, right? I mean, what's a good place to sort of start whilst talking about this topic? I'm kind of thinking, you know what? I have a wife, I have 3 children, Nick has 2. I'm going to take them out of school and I'm moving to Manila and I've got to outsource my business. What's Jess's guide to doing that?
Well, I mean, to be fair, it's interesting. You kind of have this remote work outsourcing thing. They go hand in hand, but a lot of people think, when you say that, like, but how much of your job that you're doing right now has anything to do with you being in your physical location?
That's a
right?
very good question. Yeah, not a lot.
Not a lot, right? And
especially now because we're in lockdown.
Yeah. You could be right here next to me, and it wouldn't matter.
Make no difference because I have to Zoom everybody, right?
Yeah. And so, I mean, for me, I feel like this particular moment in history, it's just kind of showing everyone that, oh yeah, I guess we could be doing it that way. Yeah. Like all of your clients or customers or whatever your business is, especially in this internet-based, or anyone who's in like consulting or agencies or this kind of stuff, they think, oh, well, I can't do that. Well, no, actually, look, turns out you can. Yeah. Turns out, there are ways. So as far as that part of it, like, can you do it? Like, it can be done. But then, when you start getting into the outsourcing part, which now it's getting even more interesting, because that used to just mean, yes, like, again, with this currency arbitrage thing, you've got, many countries that the normal wages are less than they are in the Western countries. So there's a good win-win there for people. You can get great talent that's a little bit less expensive than the talent that you would get in the West. And that's there. But now it's getting really interesting. There's so much more happening because, you have a lot more people that are living all over the place. And then you have a lot more people in the Western countries that are also working remotely, right? So now it's not just about, it's not just about saving money and trying to get the cheapest labor that you can, because it's not always about getting cheaper. It's just also about getting the best talent. Now, all of a sudden, you're not sourcing from your local community, right? You're sourcing from the whole world. And, so it's, maybe there's someone in Arizona, or maybe there's someone in south of France, or maybe there's someone in Thailand, or maybe that, it kind of doesn't matter, right?
It doesn't matter. So, and you're right. I mean, I discovered recently for the last few years, one of the things that we've been doing is we've realized that actually mums returning back to work after having a break for looking after the kids.
Yep.
Well, they're just the most remarkable people on the planet, right? They're used to dealing with stress. They're used to balancing 40 things in the air. They can multitask like nobody else. They know how to work, and nothing seems to stop them. If they've got a cold, they'll just keep going. Whereas me, I'm out. Do you know what I mean? And the key thing that I've found to this sort of particular group of people coming and working for you and doing well is being flexible with where they work. So as in they can work remotely because they need to be at home. They need to pick up the kids. They need to be flexible in their hours. And if I can give them that, that's more important, I think, than the salary, than the job title. I found it quite a fascinating sort of thing.
Yeah. And what's neat is there's a lot of these kind of niches popping up, that's really interesting. So that's one that's been definitely popping up. And what's, and again, for you, like, what do you care if like your podcast edit is done right now or in an hour and a half from now, right? Like it needs to be done in 2 weeks. Like it's fine, right? So the fact that they have to run and go get the kids from school or whatever, it doesn't matter. It's all about output. And that's kind of the other thing, kind of zooming back into the topic here, like, it's, you have to change this mindset that's more about output versus just like I hired them for this many hours and they're just are they at work? Because that's always the concern about the remote hire, right? Is that, well, when I have them at the office, I can look over their shoulder and make sure that they're getting it done, where it's about changing your mindset into output and saying like, oh no, well, I just need her to finish the edit on the podcast. And that's it. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter when it gets done, as long as it gets done by this time and the quality is good, who cares, right?
Yep. And so, to talk about that a little bit and some of the pitfalls that people have switching to that is, you really need to work on your processes and your expectations. And you maybe have to define that a little bit more than if you were doing the in the office hire, right? Because in the office you can.
Okay. When you talk about defining your processes and your expectations, when you're hiring someone remotely, they're managing their time. They're much more autonomous is probably a good way to put it. They have to be, I think, a much more responsible kind of person. Do you know what I mean? A high caliber type person. But I just want to clarify what you said there. I have to be clear with the processes and expectations for that person.
Right.
Because if I'm not, is that where a lot of the problems lie?
Exactly. Because if you don't create a lot of expectations of the output that you want, then they might just be sitting around all day, especially, I mean, we'll get into this too, like hourly versus full-time salary or part-time salary. When you put someone on a salary, then, if you don't have them, if you're not feeding them stuff to do and aren't very particular about the things that you want, then there can become a miscommunication there where you said, hey, well, what did you do the last 2 weeks? And then they say, what do you mean? You didn't send me anything. Or, there's this kind of thing where if you say, okay, like every Friday I want this and by this date and this date I want this. And, 3 times a week I want you to check in and do this thing. And, the more you can define those exact output items, the better it can be. And of course, this varies widely by role and by level and this kind of stuff. But learning to define that is a skill that does take some time and you will stumble a little bit. And so on that, talking about how do I, Matt, kind of get into this and what do I do? I generally recommend to start by hiring someone in an hourly situation. So then if you screw up on the expectations and you forget to send them something because you get distracted, you're not burning all this extra cash. And there's not this thing where you said, well, I was paying you last week. What did you do? And they say, well,
So you're
what do you
talking
mean?
about I pay you for the hours that you work, and if I don't send you any work, then you've not worked, and therefore I don't pay you.
Right, right. And more of like a freelance style situation
Yeah, yeah.
versus a, salaried part or full time,
Okay. So find someone that's hourly at the start and spend as much time as possible defining the process and the expectations for that person. I would say, I mean, I had a virtual PA for a number of years. Actually, she lives in Manila. She lives somewhere in the Philippines. Lovely lady. Still in touch with her, actually.
Yep.
And I found at the start, I had to over communicate my expectations and over communicate the processes, because not only was she remote, but she was another culture. That was another language. Do you know what I mean? And her English was awesome, but there was still this barrier that I had to overcome. And so I get why you would say define the process, define the expectations. Sean here has put on Facebook, how do you know the people you're outsourcing to will do a good job? Do you research or get reviews? So you say start with someone hourly. How do we find a good person?
Sure. So yeah, I'll get into that a little bit. That's a good question. So my hiring process, what I like to do is, first of all, for these hourly people, there's a lot of places you can go, but I'll drop a couple places here. So the biggest one that's kind of the most famous is Upwork.
Okay.
And that's where you can hire hourly people. Another one that we've been using a bit recently that's been really great as well is called FreeUp. And they're kind of they kind of do similar to Upwork, but they have a curated, they curate a little bit more for you.
So they control a little bit more who delivers the services.
Yeah. So that can be quite helpful, and we recently did a hire with them, and have been pretty happy. So that's been well, but that can save you some of the trouble, I guess. I think I've lost your audio there.
suddenly dropped, and I have no idea why. No settings or anything changed. Okay, so we are back on Facebook Live. I've got Jesse back. Hopefully you guys can hear me. I'm just going to go onto Facebook. Give me a second here, Jesse. Whilst, fortunately, we can edit all of this out for the podcast. And I will. I'll just let the guys know we've restarted. Okay. Yay, Sean, you can hear us okay, which is great. So Sean's back. Okay. So hopefully people will come and find us again. Let me just share. Share. Definitely don't want to share to that. Warren Hansen, haha, yeah, thanks, bud, appreciate that. Oh dear, technical issues. What can I say? Let's just share now, and we're back. We'll give people a few seconds here to rejoin us. Okay, very good. So, okay, good. Now we're back. Phew.
All right.
Thanks, Jesse. Thanks, everybody, for rejoining us. People are rejoining now, and I'm getting mocked mercilessly in the comments, which is fair enough. I wish I could tell you why that happened, but it just... Anyway, let's not go there. So, Jesse, we were talking about, before I got cut off there, we were talking about how you source how you source people hourly, and you talked about Upwork, and you started to talk about FreeUp.
Yeah, so we'll start with Upwork. So with Upwork, you're dealing with a gigantic pool of people. So this is everything from the bottom of the barrel to all the way to top end Western people as well. So Upwork has really kind of become a huge gamut of talent now.
Yeah.
So that the good thing about that is that there's a huge gamut of talent. The bad thing is that you get a lot of applications and a lot of riffraff. So
there's a lot of wheat to sift.
Yeah, exactly. So back to the question here, whether it be with Upwork or hiring from anywhere, what I like to do is give people a real test. So, this idea of people's resumes, and of course that's useful and everything, but until they actually do the work, who cares where they went to school or what prestigious company they worked at? If they can't do the task that you want them to do, it doesn't really matter,
So for every role you have, you create a test, which you then upload to the site, and people complete the test, and you judge them on the basis of doing that.
Yeah, so this is not every applicant. These are like the ones that so maybe like 3 people, 4 people per position, or whoever comes in that you think actually is looks like a valid candidate, right?
And what sort of test would you give them? Is it a complex test? Do you pay them for that test?
I definitely pay them for the test.
Mm-hmm.
And it's usually something that'll take like 2 to 4 hours, maybe.
Okay.
And, of course, it depends on the position you're hiring for, right? And then what I like to do, if it works out, is I like to give all the people that I'm considering the same task. So,
so then you can
this is an actual investment. Yeah. And usually it will be a task of something that I actually want done, but I have them all do the same task. So then you can actually compare apples to apples, and you can find out if there was, because otherwise if you give them different tasks, then maybe there was a hard part in one of the tasks that you didn't realize. And then you think, oh, this person's just an idiot, but no, actually it was hard and they would have all missed it or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So Yeah, I like to give the same task. And again, it depends on what the project is. So let's say it was the podcast editing, right?
Yeah.
So fine, you have them edit one podcast, but you have all three people edit the same podcast, not different ones.
And see what comes
and
back. That's interesting.
Give them the same instructions, this kind of stuff. And then you can also compare their actual cost to do it. So the hourly rate also kind of matters, kind of doesn't, because if this guy's 10 an hour and this guy's 20 an hour and this guy's 30 an hour, but depending on how long it actually takes them to output the work, this is back to thinking about output, and so then you can compare, maybe the guy that was $30 an hour got it done faster than the $10 an hour guy. So even, you can then say, the total cost here, maybe he did a great job and he got it done in less time. So it's not always about race to the bottom for hourly rate. That's definitely not helpful. That's something that a lot of people get caught in, is they think like, outsourcing, low, cheap, save all this money, which you definitely can save money. But, if you just dive to the bottom of the barrel, you're probably going to have a bad experience, because first of all, you're also new to outsourcing. So, and then if you hire someone else who's new to being a freelancer,
it's a recipe for it to go wrong, isn't it? And this is where people get burned, I think, and go, that just doesn't work. It's all nonsense.
They hire someone for $2 an hour to do some task, and then it ends up being a failure, and they say, all these guys are idiots, and they barely speak English, and we can't communicate. Well, you hired the bottom person, but hire someone for $15, $20, $30, $40 an hour, and you'll then things change.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
So to summarize give the task, give the tests, compare the tests, and then you can make
let them know it's that you've given them a test.
Yeah. You say, okay, I'm going to give you a test task. Mm-hmm. Like, you're one of the final candidates. Like, I liked your resume. I liked the conversation we had or something. So I'm going to hire you for a paid test task. So you hire them at the rate, and you give them so they know, and then it's great. And then they're paid for it. So they don't feel like, oh man, this guy's trying to get me out of free work, because a lot of people do that, and freelancers are aggravated about that.
Yeah. And this is why you pay them, because they're much more likely to do it well. I'm right. Okay.
Yeah. And whatever, for you spend a few $100s to make sure you got the right person. It's a very good investment for you. Right.
So do you go and find someone, let's say to do the podcasting, you find someone, the guy that actually is doing our podcast editing, Tim, we outsource to him. He's going to have a heck of a job tonight, let me tell you. But Tim, I'm not looking for somebody else, but I am curious. Yes, I'll carry on this example. Is going to be sweating. What's going on? Do you stick them with the same person, or do you go and find other people? Do you have like 2 or 3 people that would do the podcast?
I try to bring in the one person and kind of turn them into a team member, okay. And maybe that team member only works for me for 5 hours a month to do that one task. Yeah. But I try to, nourish that relationship instead of, because it's a lot of work to go back to the drawing board and find people and whatever.
And actually, the longer they're with you, the more they get to know you, the idiosyncrasies and so on and so forth. So, I mean, Sean's been busy here in the comments, which is great. He's obviously got a lot of questions. How do you avoid dishonesty or scams?
Well, I mean, again, starting with the hourly and starting with Upwork is a good way to start, because with Upwork, they actually have a time tracking software that they have to like clock in with their computer, and it actually takes screenshots of their computer every 10 minutes of what they're doing. Oh, wow. And it will, if they're not like active, it clocks them out. So it's like 10-minute increments of billing. So you only pay for actual work time. Okay. Which is pretty cool, because then you can actually pay them a little bit more than you might have been paying someone else who is just a freelancer, just roughly billing you by the hour. And, then they're getting also truly paid for their actual time that they're putting their time into. So it's a two-sided thing. But then how do you not get scammed is you could look over the screenshots and you see, were they on YouTube the whole time, or were they in the editing app, right?
Yeah.
And what I've found, a lot of people, there's a lot of controversy about these tracking apps and that Upwork has, and there's a bunch of third-party ones if you're not working with Upwork. I've found with any good freelancer, you will know within the first couple of weeks, probably within the first couple of tasks, whether or not I never look at those screenshots after the hire or like after the first like week or month or something, because once again, you start looking at the output and then it doesn't matter, and then the good freelancers are honest with that stuff. And you will know right away when you do the test and one guy took 10 hours and the other guy took 2 hours, and then, you can go see what he did.
And that's why you want to get a broad spectrum, isn't it? Because they need to be, like you said, one's done 2, one's done 10. It's alarm bells are going to start ringing, right?
Yeah. And you'll know right away. I mean, there's a lot of professionals that, everyone just is trying to earn a living, right? And there's a lot of people that have been doing this freelance stuff for a long time, and they're working hard and doing a great job, so. Have you ever then had bad experiences yourself? I mean, a lot of what you're talking about sounds like this is born out of your experience. Have you had? Oh, yeah, definitely. Tons of times. Like, you will inevitably hire people, or at least attempt to hire people that are bad at what they do, or aren't a match for what you thought they were going to be, or the scam thing doesn't really happen. Like, that's just not part of it. Like, maybe you'll bring someone on, and even with Upwork, you can even dispute those hours. So how they work is I think the weekend's on Sunday at midnight, and then you have until Thursday to dispute the hours, and then that's when you get billed for that week. So it's also kind of handy because it auto bills. So you don't have to worry about making the payments and dealing with invoices. And the freelancer is also safe because they don't have to worry about collecting money from deadbeat employers, right? Yeah. So it works out really nice that way. But you have that window. So the scam thing is just not. A lot of people think like, again, this is how, if I'm not looking over their shoulder, where you kind of can look over their shoulder with the apps.
Yeah, with the screencasts.
Yeah. So it's kind of
bad experiences, from what I understand, from what you've just said, tend to be around hiring people that aren't maybe the right fit or the right skill level. And I guess the beauty of what you're doing with hiring hourly is you just stop that and you go and then start again.
Yeah. And so then, I generally recommend you start like this way, and then you can kind of work your way up. So again, one thing to kind of bring up is, aside from Upwork, is this free up company that we've been using a little bit. They take some of that guesswork out for you. So they have a very similar business model, but they vet everyone. So their kind of pitch is that, you only get the 1%. And so you put up the job post, and then they just drop 1 or 2 people in your lap, and then they say, this is a good person, interview them, try them out, see what you think. If you don't like them, we'll give you another person. So that has a lot of potential as well. And then after this, once you have a little bit of experience managing these kind of people and this kind of stuff, then is where you might want to look into hiring people more like salary based,
So would you take the freelancer you're hiring hourly, and would you make it a more permanent thing with them?
Maybe, if you need that. But I'm just kind of talking more of a general, you as an experienced employer, outsourcing employer, remote employer, we should say. I'm just saying start with hourly before you dive into full-time and part-time salary people, so that you get to learn how to manage someone that works for you 2 hours a week instead of 20, right? Like it's a lot of tasks and work and management to get all that stuff we talked about earlier in place. So
how do you manage someone that works for you just 2 hours a week? Is it just you're emailing, you're just wanting reports?
Yeah, mostly email or with we use project management system. So whatever you use, some people use whatever Trello or Basecamp or this kind of stuff, and then you just assign tasks. Like once you kind of get in the groove, usually we start out with email and just simple, and then kind of move them into the system once they're a little more vetted and we know that they're going to be more part of the team, and then it's very clean. I mean, a lot of people like to do all this Slack and daily stand-ups and all that kind of stuff. And once you get more of a team and there are more hours and this kind of stuff, that kind of culture part of it can become very helpful. But, when you're starting off and you're just doing this smaller stuff, it's pretty straightforward. It's about defining what you need to be done. And then you just, you send them assign the task to them and say, okay, like, here's our new podcast. Like, this is how it's going to be edited, and then they turn it back to you, and then that's it, and or you go back and forth about the edits or whatever, this kind of stuff, But again, at the beginning, you're going to need more communication to kind of zero in on things.
Yeah, especially because they are remote, that they need all that extra stuff. So, I take it you've hired people remotely all over the world.
Yep, definitely.
Would that be a correct assumption? And have you found that there are certain countries which work better than others, or is it's not about countries, it's more about
depends
people?
On what you're looking for. So there's been certain regions that have kind of emerged as leaders in certain categories. And now the kind of new emerging area is actually the West, which is kind of funny because we started by jumping away from that. So like this talking about the moms at home that like used to be the career woman, has all these skills that she's not putting to use. Like that's this new available category, right? But as far as the other like non-Western countries, kind of the big ones are, so here the Philippines is a big one. And the Philippines kind of thrives on things that you need English as your first language for. So you've got a lot of native or almost native English speakers here. So we're talking about stuff like customer support or content writing or like assistant stuff, like how you said your PA was here, this kind of stuff. Anything that has to do with the phone or any customer service or also creative work is good for here. Any of that more kind of personal stuff that especially with the English. And also the thing about the Philippines is versus a lot of other regions, their culture is more Western influenced and is closer to the West. So while there will still be a culture gap, the influence here of the music and the movies and just culture in general, the pop culture of the West is very alive here. And while you think that doesn't matter, like if you're hiring someone for social media management, it does matter. Like the little jokes and the right emoji that kind of is, I don't know, these things like those little cultural details, they matter, right?
Yeah, they matter a big lot. So yeah, I think, and one of the things I remember when I was when we had the thing going on with the lady in the Philippines, somebody said to me, you should pay them for 13 months out of the year. They sort of had this, you pay them 1 month twice. Was it December? You paid twice in December?
So here in the Philippines, again, this would be only if you were hiring them full time. That they do what's called 13th month. A lot of countries do that actually. In Panama, when I was living there, they have 13th month as well. And it's essentially a way for it's like creates a savings account for them, sort of. As an employer, you just build that in your head to the salary, and then they get kind of their December money to Christmas presents and end of the year stuff like that. But I mean, when you're dealing with this hourly stuff, this is not really going to be on your radar.
Yeah, which is where you start and warm yourself up. It says here in my outline, Jesse, we've got copywriters and productized services. Smacking my microphone. Maybe that's why it stopped working earlier. But what do you mean by that? Let's sort of get into that a little bit.
Sure. So quickly, one little last point there that I'll slip in about the regions. So Philippines for that kind of stuff, copywriting actually is something that you can get here as well.
Yeah.
But then anything that's development, any type of development is Eastern Europe. So there's a really good site that I can recommend there for hiring programmers, but this is going to be more for full-time positions or part-time positions, not hourly. It's jobrack.eu. Yep. So that's a good one for hiring from Eastern Europe, and we love to hire from Eastern Europe for development. Just really good coders, really good work ethic. It's great. Okay. So that, and then so now back to copywriters and productized services. So copywriters, you can hire here in the Philippines or now in the West as well. So then I'll drop one more place that's good to hire remote people if you're hiring part or full time. And there's a lot of Westerners here, which is really good, is Dynamite Jobs. It's dynamitejobs.co. They have probably the best remote job board. It's more of like a job board versus like a freelance marketplace. So again, if you're and there's a lot of Westerners on there. So if you're looking to hire a copywriter or an editor or a project manager and you want someone from the West or that, here from the Philippines that's very Western fluent, that's a really good spot for that. So,
and is that an hourly place or is that more salary based?
More salary based, yeah.
Okay.
So, anyways, kind of, moving into copywriting and stuff. So these days, content is king, right? And especially now, it's the way that everyone's driving traffic and it's really the way to do it. So, one thing that we've been seeing a lot of is just hiring out your own copywriters, to start developing your own content, or now they're kind of emerging a lot of these productized services. And by that, I mean services where, you pay more fixed rates, like, this many articles for this price or this kind of thing. And it's more of like it's kind of like an agency, but a productized service is where they take what's traditionally a service product and they turn it into traditionally a service and they turn it into a product. Yeah. So instead of paying this hourly thing, they say, oh no, we do this many articles for this much or whatever. So, I don't have any specifics to offer on that yet for sources, but we're working on some partnerships for that maybe. So maybe we can put some offers together for you guys for that as well.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see because I've seen that more and more. It's like you're heading back to what you said right at the start, where you need to think about output, and productized services is basically I'm paying you for 5 blog posts. I'm not paying you for 15 hours it takes to do them. I'm paying you for the output. And in fact, I say to the guys, in our agency and in our consulting business, one of the worst things that I think we can do is sell an hourly rate, is to sell ourselves at an hourly rate, $75 an hour, $100 an hour, whatever the hourly rate is. I think that's a really tricky sell because if you're paying someone for an hour's worth of work and they only work 58 minutes, you're not happy. Do you know what I mean? It's
right.
Whereas if you focus on selling outcomes, the onus on me is to deliver that outcome as best as I can in the time frame that's the most efficient that I can. And actually outcomes for me seem to be an easier sell. I don't know if you've noticed that or if that's just me.
It's trending huge right now. I've seen so many agencies that are now pivoting into productizing. And so it's like just deleting the entire agency model. They don't do quote requests anymore. It's just, no, we just do these 4 things. And this is how much they cost, and it's add to cart, And what's so cool about that model is it allows the service provider or the agency or the productized service agency or whatever you want to call them to really hone in on their processes and make that really efficient. Yeah. So then they can start to increase their margins while at the same time the product gets better. So, and this isn't just for copywriting. This is for everything, So, there's stuff out there for design and for marketing, just every aspect of stuff. Yeah. This is just possible all over. Yeah. And I'm hugely for it. We've been using it a lot. and it's really cool, and it also gives agency people that are providing services a way to actually scale, because they can start to really hone in on this and get really awesome at that one thing, instead of, in general, as an agency, you got to be kind of like pretty good at a bunch of stuff, you know. So yeah, very, very cool trend that's emerging right now, and yeah, we've been using it for all kinds of stuff.
So let's talk that, because we started talking about copywriting. You can get copywriters in the West, you can get them in the Philippines. I said right at the start, you're the co-founder of DropInBlog, right? So let's talk about this sort of content aspect of it. So I can obviously go and outsource my copywriting and use those sites you mentioned, you know, and at work, free up, what was the other one? Dynamite Jobs. I can use those sites that you mentioned, but why would I want to do that? I think it's a great question. So you've obviously written this DropInBlog system. Let's talk about that.
Sure. So, I mean, just, you know, if you think about your e-commerce platform or whatever you're trying to sell, right? You know, you need to get customers, right? So if you're running your own store, you need to drive traffic. And so, you know, the easy way to walk in is to do paid traffic. And that's what most people start with, right? And the great thing about paid traffic, of course, is that you get results today, right? But the bad thing about paid traffic is you have to pay for it forever.
A lot, usually, a lot of money.
Yeah. So the good thing about content marketing is that over time, you can start to build that organic traffic and replace or augment that paid traffic, and then eventually have a bunch of free traffic that's coming in that just, you know, essentially prints money for you, right? And so it becomes quite important. And what we've seen become really popular with that is you do the paid advertising, and then you know what keywords work. So you don't have to do the normal keyword research, write all this content, and then see what happens and hope for the best. If you do the paid stuff first, you already know what's coming in that works and is converting for you. So then you say, oh, great, like here's this keyword cluster that is just crushing it for me, but I'm paying $4 a click to get these people to my site, and it's killing me. And then you say, okay, well, maybe now we need to put together a content plan to try to fill up the rankings with our results so that we can drive traffic into our e-commerce store. And, you know, a lot of people are short-sighted, so that sounds like a lot of work, and that's a long time from now. And it takes a little while. But, you know, if you're in this for the long game and you want to win, you'll see anybody who's serious about e-commerce is going hard on content. And that's because once you fill up that search engine rankings, like, you know, the traffic just flows in forever. And so, so that's the deal. So we kind of wanted to solve that for a number of platforms. So originally, DropInBlog, it's basically a blog product to put on a website that is not built in WordPress. So there are a lot of ways you can make websites that are not WordPress. And usually if you want to add a blog, usually if you want to add a blog to them, then you end up having to install WordPress in a subdomain, and then you have to manage two systems and all of this kind of stuff. So DropInBlog solves that problem. We're our own blogging platform, and we just do blogging, where WordPress, while great, it does everything, which is sometimes great and sometimes a real pain. So DropInBlog just does the blogging part, and it does it very well. And we kind of fit into almost every platform. We're agnostic. So back to the topic at hand here, when it comes to e-commerce, we just recently released a app for Shopify, and we drop right into the Shopify existing.
Yeah, and I was stoked about this, because when we had the pre-call and we were talking about this, you just launched it on Shopify. Because if there's one complaint I hear more and more about, there's probably 3 or 4 key complaints you hear about Shopify, but one of them definitely is that their native blogging system is just pants, right? And so you've got every man and his dog who knows what they're talking about where marketing's concerned going, do content marketing, it's flipping brilliant. And then everyone who's got a Shopify site going, yeah, that's genius, but how do I do that? And so the net result was, like you say, a lot of people would set up a blog on a subdomain, so blog.myshop.com rather than, which has SEO implications, doesn't it? It knocks you down the rankings a little bit. So it's not as good as doing it on the main domain.
Right.
And so with your system, if you're on a Shopify site and you want to do blogging well, they should definitely check it out, because you've actually made blogging easy for Shopify, right?
Yeah, it's a much better platform than what they have built in. I mean, for Shopify, you got to realize that the blogging platform that they have, that's just a thorn in their side. They don't care about blogging. They care about e-commerce, and they do it very well, right? And then everyone says, oh, but we need to content market. So they, okay, we'll whip together this thing. And, they've barely made any updates to it since they started it, So we kind of decided to flip that on its head and build a really great blogging platform that is very simple and clean and has all the features that people need. And, we made it, for example, that you can inject products directly into the blog post, which you can't even do with the built-in Shopify platform, which just
defies known logic.
Yeah.
In fact, any e-commerce site where you write a blog post and you cannot embed the product that you're talking about in that blog post, for me, that never made sense as an e-commerce site owner. Do you know what I mean? It was just
it's kind of odd, right? Kind of odd. So it's kind of got that, and then also we have like a built-in SEO analyzer that most people don't know everything about SEO, and it's a lot to keep up with. So we kind of cover the basics for you, where you can kind of put in your keyword target, and there's a couple meters that tell you like, oh, you should put that again in your title, or you should add it into this part, or this kind of stuff.
So it's like a beginner's guide to helping people that don't really have the SEO degree to try and get better at doing SEO.
And even if you know it, it's just nice to have it all figuring it out for you, so you don't have to just remember, oh, did I put that in the alt tag, whatever. Like, it just kind of does it for you. So with those things combined, it's been a real win, and everyone's loving it in Shopify. So it's quite useful for people, and it's been fun for us to be developing that community, because we've had DropInBlog for quite a few years, just kind of people putting it on custom sites, and we work kind of out of the box with many platforms, even like other e-commerce like Big Cartel or some of these smaller ones and stuff. We just work out of the box for those guys. But with Shopify, we did a real full app deep integration.
And that's been live for a number of months now.
About 2 or 3 months now. Yeah.
And how's it gone so far?
It's been fantastic, actually. We're not from the Shopify world, so I've worked with it a bit, and I know it, and I like the system, and so this was kind of our first dive into that community, and it's been great. The users are welcoming. They definitely have questions and ideas and lots of stuff happening. So we've been hitting it hard and kind of adding little tweaks and trying to accommodate people with their ideas, and also developing a lot. So it's been pretty fun, and we've been really well received. So it's been very exciting, actually.
So what's some of the things you've learned about the Shopify community? You're new to it. What's some of the things you've kind of gone, oh, I would never have guessed that?
Well, one thing that I've noticed is that a lot of them are just kind of new to marketing. So they have their e-commerce store for whatever reason, and where a lot of the internet nerds that we're used to dealing with, they think marketing 24/7. Where a lot of these guys they're more sales, or product makers. It's like, we recently had a girl who has a jewelry store who signed up. She has a physical jewelry store in San Francisco, and so she has a physical store, and then she added the Shopify store so she could sell online, and now she's starting to look into content marketing. And it's like she doesn't know a lot about internet marketing, and so us kind of seeing oh wow, having this SEO analyzer has been so helpful for her, where she can kind of walk through and this kind of stuff. And so it's kind of helped us solidify our onboarding and make it easier. And we've just it's forced us to look at our product and try to make it as simple as possible and easy to use as possible.
And to onboard as best as you can.
Yeah.
I've always found that key with software. You've got to onboard super well, right? I mean, just super well. Because if people are
And
paying for it, they want to.
I think we were able to be a little lazy with when we were dealing with the more developer-y community, where this is a little bit less, it's not a developer-y community. So we had to kind of dumb it down a little bit, but which was actually great. We should have done that before, because I'm sure we were losing business from our regular customers that thought it was too techy or something, So now this has really, catapulted us to the front of simplifying everything and making it really just dead simple to use,
Okay. So for someone who's new to content marketing and the whole SEO thing then, and it sounds like a daunting experience, what would be some of your top tips on getting started there?
I would say, start out with putting together some keywords and just thinking about, what would you search for, and if you're already doing paid ads, then like I said before, that's kind of the easy way that you can already see what's been working. Yeah. But if you haven't got that far, you can do some light keyword research and you can start to put together a plan based on things that you think people would search that you want to come up for, right? And then put together a basic plan and start writing out that content or hiring someone to write out that content, and then put together a plan that it's not just today, right? Content marketing is a long-term play. So, you need to
think sort of 6-12 months down the line, haven't you? I think for content marketing.
Yeah, because it takes a while to create the content, to publish the content, for Google to pick up on the content, this kind of thing, And obviously this is a big category, but it's one of those things where you need to start now and you need to be consistent. So just, you need to put out content, and you need to put out content that is relevant to the searches that you want people to get to your site with.
Relevant to the community. And like you say, for me, consistency is key with the whole content marketing. If you can't do it consistently. And this comes back to one of your original points, actually. If you're not good at content marketing, but you need to do it, this is one of these ideal things which you can outsource and start to build a remote team. They can do the copywriting, they can do the SEO research. You can outsource the graphics to get all that done. They put the whole thing together, and you're involved with it, but the majority of the work is done by a team you've outsourced, which is super cool. And that just works super well. Listen, Jesse, I'm aware of time and how incredibly early in the morning it is for you right now. Just want to say thanks. Really got a lot out of this. I've got lots of notes. I'm going to be checking out all those websites. We will link to all the websites that you mentioned in the show notes if people want to grab them. Jesse, real quick, if people want to get a hold of you, if they want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. Well, you can always check out DropInBlog at DropInBlog.com or search us in the App Store on Shopify. If you want to get in touch with me, you can check out my personal blog at Schoberg.net, and we'll put that in the show notes as well.
Yeah. We'll put all those links there. Schoberg.net is where you're blogging, which is cool. Listen, Jesse, it has been an absolute pleasure to chat with you. My apologies again for the blip we had, the technical issue in the middle. It all seems to be working well now, which is great. Thanks, everybody on Facebook for the comments and making fun of us when it did all go wrong. That's okay. It's been real fun, Jesse. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time. But
thanks a lot for having me on, Matt. Really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that interview with Jesse. Wasn't he fab? Just sharing all his insights and wisdom on outsourcing. I don't know about you, but I got a lot of notes out of that, and we will put all of my notes in the show notes to this podcast. We will, of course, edit the video to take out the technical blip in the middle. And if you're listening to the podcast wondering what was going on, we had a technical blip. That's all you need to know. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. All good places should have the e-commerce show with Matt Edmondson. You can subscribe to it. We put these out on a weekly basis, and it is free content, which goes out to you, all full of good stuff. We talk to great and amazing guests each and every week as we put these shows out. So make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. And if you are so inclined, why don't you come and join us on Facebook Live like Sean and the gang did tonight, and just throw your questions in and get them answered by by a guest, which is always awesome. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Do subscribe. Do get in touch. Head on over to mattedmondson.com to get the show notes and all the links for today's episode. All that's left for me to say is thank you so much for being involved. Thanks for being a part of what's going on. And I will see you in the next show. Goodbye for now.
You've been listening to the eCommerce Podcast with Matt Edmondson. Join us next time for more interviews, tips, and tools for building your business online.